while you're talking, I'm gonna go see if I can pull more people in.
Okay. Thanks for putting this together, Jim and team. Okay, I'm gonna continue where Dr. Andy Kaufman left off. Who here, we got a lot of new people now, who here believes that COVID came out of a lab in China? Honestly, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay. So who here knows the work of Dr. David Martin? And who here refers to his work when trying to lend credence to the idea that COVID came out of a lab? Raise your hand if that's you. So what if I told you that I just did an interview with Dr. David Martin about a month and a half, 2 months ago, in which David Martin clarified there is not and never has been a particle or a virus that was weaponized being transmitted from person to person. There has never been a particle that was weaponized in the lab being transmitted from person to person. Is that a shocking thing to hear? Is that shocking to you? Because a lot of people use his statements to try to lend credence to the idea that there was a virus made in a lab. Now, setting the gain of function thing aside for a while, who here believes at some level the fluids or the sneezing, coughing of another person can get them sick? Honestly, who believes that? Raise your hand. Do you believe that? Okay, what if I told you, a lot of people get caught in the weeds, stuck in the weeds on virus isolation. Does the virus exist? Does it not? What if I told you in the over 50 experimental attempts throughout history to show that disease is spread via the fluids of a sick person, every single one of them failed, including using fluids from chickenpox pustules? Is that a shocking thing to hear? So this entire idea that disease is spread via the fluids of a sick person is completely unsubstantiated. It has never, ever, ever been demonstrated. But we walk about life, the overwhelming majority of us, even in the freedom space, as if it's true. We walk about life as if it is well established that there are these little particles or microbes passing between us that cause disease. But that entire paradigm, including the idea of a gain-of-function lab-made virus, is completely unproven. 100% unproven. So for those of you who raised your hand and said you think COVID came from a lab, there's actually zero evidence to back up that claim. And further, we can use the CDC's own data to help dismantle that idea that there was a particle being spread. 95% of COVID, quote COVID, and again, COVID is just a label, 95% of COVID deaths had an average of 4 comorbidities, most being lifestyle or nutrition related. 79% of hospitalizations were in overweight or obese people. This one, there was a study published in July of 2021 that looked at 540,000 people who had been labeled as a COVID-related death. And they found that the second strongest risk factor for death associated with, quote, COVID was fear/anxiety related disorders. Is that pretty shocking? But is it really that shocking?
No.
I don't think it's that shocking. But the point is, human beings are impressionable. 5 minutes, dang, that's fast, okay. Let me try to wrap this up. So when we look at this idea that disease is spread from a sick person, there was an experiment that was done at the height of the Spanish flu by a guy named Milton Rosenau, who took 100 volunteers and exposed them via various methods to the fluids and directly to Spanish flu patients. He took infected blood from Spanish flu patients, injected it into these healthy people. He had them open mouth cough at close range. He had nasal secretions from Spanish flu patients and swabbed the back of these people's throats and noses. Can you guess how many people became sick as a result of these experiments? Zero. And that is just one example of a series of examples that we have documented. If you have your phone on you right now, I need you to do something for me real quick. Pull it out. Pull it out real quick. Go to theendofcovid.com. Who here has watched The End of COVID? Wow, okay, good number of you. Thank you so much. We've had 120,000 people tune in to the end of COVID, and it completely dismantles anything related to COVID, takes you from A to Z on the entire COVID narrative, and also dismantles the idea, the unproven, and dare I say disproven idea, that disease is spread via the fluids of a sick person. So with that, and I know you're like, well, what about this? Like, how do you explain Sally getting sick right after Jimmy? They go to daycare. Think to yourself, if you hadn't been conditioned with this belief, what would be the other plausible explanations for what causes 2 or more people in the same space to experience symptoms of illness? Think about it. Exposure to similar toxins, similar eating habits, similar malnutrition, similar exposure to non-native EMFs. Fear, shared emotional trauma. And then what about the reality that we have a measurable and observable electromagnetic field that surrounds our bodies? How do our phones communicate? How does Bluetooth work? We have that technology inside of us, embedded in us, inherently a part of us. So given that we know electromagnetic fields can communicate information, is it too implausible to think that we can communicate and share information with each other? And if I'm experiencing a detox, that I might then communicate that to other people around me who I share space with commonly and say, hey, I'm going through a detox right now, you might need it as well. And then they experience symptoms of illness as well. Is that too implausible? No, it's not. So the other piece that I want to talk about, actually let me share this. I'm trying to wrap it up in 10 minutes. There's a lot to share. But another study that was done in 1920 attempting to show that disease is spread via the fluids of a sick person was done with a placebo group. So the placebo group received saline instead of receiving the fluids from a sick person.
You're good.
And more people became sick when exposed to the saline than those who were exposed to the fluids of a sick person. Is that shocking to hear? That's shocking to hear. So there's probably a lot of questions coming up about gain of function. How do you explain? Oh my gosh, 1 minute. Okay. How do you explain all this? So the last thing that I want to say is, a lot of us are struggling to find our people, find our tribe wherever we are. I have developed a website right now that we're going to turn into an app in 2024 called thewayforward.com. That's my organization. So if you go to thewayforward.com, and it's spelled FWRD, so thewayforward.com, we're based on a value for value model, meaning you pay whatever you want to be a part of our community. And that gives you the opportunity to type in your zip or postal code, find like-minded people near you, like-minded businesses near you, and then we have a marketplace and a bunch of other stuff that we're working on, so you can stay connected and find your tribe within your local area, because there's a lot more of us than we realize. Last thing I'll say, the end of COVID.com will completely change your entire paradigm and potentially your life with respect to health. So that's at the end of COVID.com. Thank you so much, Jim, for putting this on. We appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, brother, for everything you've been doing.